Good evening, everybody. Welcome to my channel. Eric's UK here. Give me a moment. There we go. No more glare. You don't want to know what that is. I've just finished watching a video by a channel I've not seen before called Master the Game, where he talks about whether the GM is or is not a storyteller. For my money, I understand both sides where he comes from in his particular video, on the grounds of a GM is and isn't. Because on one hand, his Master of the Game is right when he says that by definition a storyteller is telling you things that have already happened, and that's not the case in role-playing games. But I politely think that's a bit of semantics. The GM is a storyteller because the GM brings their campaign world, they bring their scenario, their setting, they come up with, this is the campaign we're going to play, whether it's a published thing or something they've written themselves, whatever, and they have a story to tell. And this is sort of where you start to get the arguments, and Master of the Game even mentions this kind of in passing in his video, that if you've got a story to tell, why are you GMing a game? You should write this down as a novel, or words to that effect, paraphrasing. And this is a term or a phrase that gets thrown around a lot, I think, on the internet, when any GM sort of says that this is the campaign I'm running, this is what I've got. Because there's this other term that gets thrown around, which I absolutely despise, called player agency, that says that players basically get to should run the game effectively. It's their game. They're the ones that want to play in it. They're the ones that who have the player agency to decide what their characters do and what they want to do. And I don't disagree with that. That is true. The players control their characters, and they partake of said story. But where I draw the line is the idea that a campaign is primarily fueled by the players. If, for example, I have a campaign idea, or I buy a campaign, whatever, and I'm going to run this particular campaign, this particular story, I'm going to be pretty piddled off if the players don't follow the story. Now, they can do what they want within the confines of the game. They can do what they want for the confines of the campaign. I know for myself that when I sit down at a gaming table with friends, getting a message, and I'm the player, I am there to tell their story. If I turn up and I went, right, this is my character, and this is what I've come up with, and we go through the first scene or the first couple of scenarios, and it goes, right, though our overarching plot seems to be this, but I've decided that I want to go and do this. And completely, well, not necessarily completely, but if you get what I mean, the players then start, if I was then to turn around and start taking the story in my direction, as a GM, I would be like, well, what the hell are you doing? If you're going to play this scenario, if you're going to play, you're here to play the story. How you get to the end of it is up to you. I'm going to use the typical literary thing here of The Lord of the Rings. Let's say we take that as our campaign. Frodo's got the ring. He meets up with his friends. He meets up with Aragorn, and they make their way to Rivendell. There's a big council meeting, and this is sort of like the beginning of that campaign, really. This is a few chapters in, and they're getting into the meat of it. It says, right, we've got to take this to Mordor and destroy it. It's the only way to do it. And everyone's doing, you have my, this and blah, blah, blah. And Frodo, the player character, turns around and goes, well, actually, No. If you want to do that, you can go and do that. I happen to quite like the idea of going off and raiding the barrows of Angmar. And that's where I want to take my story. As you know, it's fine to have player agency, and it's fine to work the scenario or the campaign that you're playing, but you can't take away from the fact that the GM has a story to tell. Again, whether it's something they've written, their own creation, or they've purchased a published campaign. You just don't do that. I think that would be very bad form for a player to decide that they're going to take the story in a different direction than what the GM is plotted and prepared to run. So I think the GM is a storyteller because they have this story, they have their campaign to run, and the players are storytellers because their role is to have fun. We all play our games for fun, but their main role after fun is to tell the story that the GM is running, but they do it in their own way. Let's pick a scenario. We've got a town, we've got a dungeon, it's a big bad in the dungeon that needs to be dealt with as the next stepping stone to the overall campaign. The default idea is that they bundle around town, they do some little quests, and they foray into said dungeon until they find the big bad and they defeat him. That's great, and that's kind of what happens. But if the players come up with some other ideas to do it, maybe they've heard some rumours that there's a tower out in the old woods that might have some clues as to the big bad or to a weakness. Well, nothing stops the GM taking that story that the players have now come up with, creating something on the fly, or even writing something in the week before the game if they know if they know what's going to happen. That's where the players become storytellers, because you can take that and you can have the players come up with ideas, and you can interact, and you can turn around and take those ideas and weave them into the tapestry of your campaign, into the tapestry of your story. The only problem you ever have with this sort of thing is where the GM says, well, no, you're supposed to be doing this. As long as the players are playing that campaign and they are playing that story the GM is telling, how they go about it is up to them. And that's where the beauty of role-playing game comes in. That's how these games work. You have a set, and you have a set path, essentially, which is the plot of the novel that everyone likes to say, go write your own book. But when you have a role-playing game, that's not a straight progression of A to B to C to D in a straight line. It's the players going from A to B, but they could go like this. They could be off book and back in again. As long as they are telling that story, how they get there is the story. And that's what I think a role-playing game should work as. It's a collaborative storytelling effort. But it's got to work on both sides. If the GM has this story, the players need to find their agency within that story. They need to say, right, this is what the GM's doing. We're playing this, but I can still make it my own story, or we can make it our story. And we can still do it within the confines of what the GM is presenting. I'm going to link to Master of the Game's video below. But I would like to see what your points of view are to this, and maybe you can even pop over to his channel, drop some comments down there as well, and whether you agree with me, whether you don't, whether you have other ideas. I think this is a really good topic. And it sort of showcases sort of things that role-playing games really sort of work well with. It's not all discussing mechanics. It's not all discussing the sides of things that generally draw arguments or whatever. This is one of those topics where we can look at it and go, what is the nature of a role-playing game? And that's a good topic in my mind. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Take care, have a good evening, and good gaming.